Hey y'all, it's Lee Bryce. Welcome to Thursday at CRS.
Ready? Are you ready now?
There's nothing I hate more than Hello Boomer. Don't be a boomer. Download the CRS app. In fact, when you do that, you can engage, ask questions of the panelists. More importantly, you can take a survey at the end of that. Who knows, you may get your free registration for CRS 2021.
By the way, if you can't make it to the New Faces show, make sure that you turn in your tickets to the registration desk. We could use those for people that definitely want to see the New Faces show. So make sure you do that.
Thursday is Team UMG at the Ryman. If you are at CRS, you cannot miss it. It's going to be awesome this year. The host is really, really awesome as well. Spectacular, really. Mostly it's the host that makes that show so fantastic that you won't want to miss that event. Team UMG at the Ryman. Doors are at 11:30. Show starts right at 12.
Don't forget, tonight we are honoring Bob Kingsley at Bob Kingsley's Acoustic Alley. And if you haven't heard, a guy named Garth is going to be there.
Silence your fucking phone so people cannot be disturbed during this.
Good morning. How does anybody follow ESPO? I'm Tom Baldrica. I'm the corporate country brand strategist for Midwest Communications, and it is my pleasure to moderate this morning, Leading the Leaders. So would you please welcome our panelists, the CEO and chairman of UMG Nashville, Mike Dungan, partner co-head of W Nashville, Scott Clayton, and the owner of the Reynolds Group, a talent coaching contest company, Steve Reynolds. Sit wherever you want. I'll move the Mike, you're in the middle.
That's what I see that.
First of all, gentlemen, thank you for being here today and sharing your time with us. We'll start, Steve, with you. Give us the quick elevator speech of what you do and what your company is all about.
So for most of my career, I was on the air, and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I needed a reason to stay there. So John Coleman helped me start a talent coaching company. He saw where the industry was going. And so I, in the United States and in Europe, I show up, I hug insecure talent until they get better.
Mike, give us the elevator speech of you and your company.
I am the chairman and CEO of UMG Nashville. I've been in Nashville 30 years now. For 10 years, I was head of marketing and then general manager at Arista Nashville in the good years when Arista was a real label. And then, took over as president of Capitol Records, ran that for 12 years, and then there was a merger, and I was asked to run the whole thing. So, as you know, we represent 4 labels in the country music space.
Scott, tell us about your role and your crew at WME Nashville.
Well, 25 years ago, I made a move to Nashville with the strange idea of booking rock bands in this town back when that wasn't really a thing. I then moved over to CAA and worked there for 17 years. And just over 2 years ago, I made a move over to WME. I help run the office there, and I also help manage the global music operation with our other offices in London, New York, LA, and Sydney. My day-to-day as an agent is also taking care of artists like the Zac Brown Band, Kings of Leon, John Mayer, Dead & Company, Train, and quite a few others.
Our panel is Leading the Leaders, and it has been said the greatest gift of leadership is a boss who wants you to be successful. Steve, how would you describe your leadership philosophy?
Well, I'm a relationships-based person. That's how I was raised by my parents. It's what I learned in the industry, that we can have our whole process of how we make for great radio, but that's irrelevant if you don't have a great culture inside the room. And so my job is to get to know the talent, grounded in vulnerability, build trust, so that the insecurities at best, as we best can make them, those go away, to teach strategy, to make everyone feel good about the process, take ownership of it. And so I think that, my management philosophy is to get deep with the talent so that I can affect them personally. I mean, the greatest compliment that I have received in the 20 years of doing this is when I conclude working with a show, that they say to me, "You changed me as a person." That's the highest compliment. And then teaching strategy on how you win in radio, making them outside thinkers, not inside thinkers. Outside thinkers being viewing what we do from a listener's perspective, and tailoring the prep of the show to that so that the ratings go up.
Scott, what's your leadership philosophy?
Well, I think the role of any leader is to maximize the potential of your team. And you got to do that by motivating your people. But in order to do that, you've got to figure out what motivates them. And that means you've got to get to know your people. You've got to listen. You've got to understand what makes them tick and why they're coming to work every day and what's important to them. So I spend a lot of time listening. And I try, in our company, we've definitely tried to build a culture that everyone feels protected, encouraged, and in a safe environment that they can jump in and do the things that we need to do as a company on behalf of our clients. A lot of that, I think, comes from just understanding what we want to do as a team, and leaders need to articulate that and need to make sure that the team understands what we're trying to accomplish.
Mike?
Well, my whole life I've been told that I smile a lot, and so I believe that to be true. And no matter what job I've ever had, I seem to get some joy out of it, even in the craziest situations, and that I found over time that kind of rubs off on people, and I found that people above me appreciated that. It wasn't looked at as class clown-like, it was looked at as motivational, and I have really kind of built a career based on that. So I try to spread kindness, and this is going to sound awful. It sounds like a Sarah McLachlan commercial, but I try to treat people with kindness, and I try to find humor and fun in everything I do, and I try to make sure that my people feel the same way. And if I see someone a little bit down in the dumps, I go after it. And at the heart of all of it is a philosophy about winning. And if you win and if you have fun, you're happy. And when people are happy, they perform really, really well. It's not too tough to steer them in the right direction. And that's just kind of it. I know that sounds, it makes me sound like a really good guy, but it's just, it's not that. It's just natural to me, and also it is a strategy. It works.
It makes me want to work for you.
Well, come on.
I mean, that's the truth. So listen, teams always reflect the personality of the leader of the team. It's always the case. You have a great general manager, you tend to have a very functional building. You have a great anchor of a show, one who preps hard, is positive, who's encouraging, who knows how to build trust, who forms significant relationships with their people, who affirms them, who's honest with them when things don't go well. And the team will reflect the personality back of the leader. When I walk in a room, when I'm considering taking on a show, it's never sign on the line that is dotted the minute the offer is made. I want to get to know the people and figure out, how do they communicate? How do they talk to one another? How do they resolve conflict? I'll ask these questions. Like, you don't get along sometimes. I've been in that environment, having come up from being on the air. It's a high-stress, high-ego environment, and there are times that you don't get along. How do you resolve that conflict? It's not if you'll argue, it's how do you resolve it? And what I find is, especially for me, I think that as more and more has been put on the program directors of radio, having to manage multiple radio stations, it's created a new avenue for me that I will walk in and solely lead the show with the program director. And where it works, I find that the team will reflect back the fun that I want to have, the honesty that I believe should be in the room, etc. And so always look to the leader and find out if they have those qualities that he just talked about, because I think those are qualities that people, cultures that people want to be around.
I'm not sure I practice it 100% of the time, but I try.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about what you said is as consolidation comes into any business, it makes it that much more difficult, because all of a sudden you have people starting to box out. You know, I went from little Arista Records to medium-sized Capitol Records to gigantic UMG, and it's so large, and you know, I've got things delegated out to such a point that, you know, you build little kingdoms. You try your best not to have silos. You try your best to tear down those silos, get everybody to work together, but it's inevitable when you get something large that you're going to have egos that conflict, and that's where really any skills you have in managing people have to come into play. That's really tough. It's a lot easier to take a bunch of people that are really happy to be along for the ride and get them to follow you. But at this point in my career, everybody seems to have a opposing position.
Well, I think the key point in what both you guys have said too, though, is the honesty piece with your team. I think you can't bullshit your people.
No.
You've got to be completely transparent with them at all times. If they're doing great work, you reward it, and if they're not, you got to be straight up about what they can do to improve. And when you run into those problems that you're talking about with teams and silos and that kind of thing, you've got to be real honest with those other leaders in your team about what they need to do to fix that. Ignoring problems like that it's never gonna get taken care of unless you're actually completely honest and open with everybody about the job they're doing.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go.
I think it's important to understand that why do we do this is everyone has a different answer. Why I do what I do is a very individual answer. And when I work with shows, I have to know, why do you do this? And I ask this question. Some tell me, well, I want to stay in this market the rest of my life. I like living here. It's where my home is. It's where my family is. It's where my interests lie. And then my job as a talent coach, as a leader, if I might, is to help them reach that goal. And then I have others that say to me, I want to be in a major market. Well, my job changes for that person. Some say I want to make $1 million a year. And then I say, this is radio. We've returned to minimum wages. You understand? We have to ask this of our people. And everyone's motivation for doing their job is probably different. And if we don't know what that is as a leader, how do we have an expectation of ourselves to move them to reach that goal?
I stand up here as an unabashed fan of Mike Dungan. I have said this to him personally. I will say this to this room, that Mike has proven that you can be a winner by having a heart. And Mike, I've always been impressed how empathy plays a part in how you lead. You just made that statement. If somebody's feeling down in the dumps, I'll go over there and figure out a way to get them out. You know how much I love you for that, but it's a really important part of leadership that I think oftentimes gets overlooked.
It does. And, you know, I came up early in my career. I was on the pop side. I did pop promotion for RCA and then went into sales for BMG and then did marketing for Clive Davis at Arista Pop. And through Clive, I met Tim Dubois and fell in love kind of with the Nashville people and the music that they were doing. And Tim, you know, wanted me to come to Nashville and run a big piece of his new company. And, you know, when you're in the pop world, you kind of get the shit beat out of you all the time. There's a great amount of humor that comes into that, so you learn a lot about that side of things and how that can work to your benefit, but you also get the shit beat out of you all the time. I came to Nashville and got in front of Tim Dubois, and it was like, he was the kindest, most wonderful man. And part of it was nobody in Arista Nashville knew what we were doing. We were all new and we were breaking all the rules. We didn't know we were breaking the rules. We weren't trying to be arrogant or punks or anything. We just did what we thought was right. But Tim showed me what I always believed to be true, that you can be a good guy and treat your people with love and respect and get the most out of them. And, you know, that's... if I didn't have that mentorship from him, I don't know, you know, how that would have shaken out for me in the future.
Scott, you mentioned listening, and all three of you guys mentioned listening. How important is that, and really kind of comes down to one of the fundamentals that, again, gets overlooked sometimes?
Well, for me, it really is the key to managing people, and it's the only way I know how to do it. I've worked for people in the past where you walk into a room and they start talking at you, and that never worked for me. I never got anything out of that. It didn't motivate me. I needed to be heard, and as a leader, I think that's the key point in really knowing your people, is to listen to what they have to say and try to understand a way forward for them. I mean, our job as leaders is to really find a path forward for the people that work for us. And that you can only do that if you really understand what the people on your team want to accomplish. Everybody doesn't want to run the company, but they all have goals. They all have things they want to achieve, and you have to figure out what that is by having those conversations. Now, it gets tricky sometimes because there are those people who want to come into your office and they just want to unload, and they want to bring their problems into the office and drop them on your desk. And managing that is always a difficult thing, and I think you have to be careful in those situations not to take on everybody else's problems. My philosophy, my way of dealing with that is generally to listen to what they have to say, and then try to come up with a way of allowing them to figure out the problem and navigate it themselves.
I always told everybody who worked for me, you have every right in the world to come through this door and bitch, but if you do, come in here and bring a solution with you, or bring some ideas about how we can fix this. Don't just come in and vent. Come in and lay it on the table, but then come in and give me ideas about how we can fix this.
Exactly. And, there are times, though, obviously, that they're coming to us for things that we do have to actually fix and that we have to jump into. And I think the other key part of the leadership piece there is, if you're going to take on the problem, then you have to go solve it. You can't just leave it hanging. You can't put it off. I think to have a team that is really functioning at maximum capacity, you've got to be able to quickly make decisions and move things forward and not stall it because it might be a difficult situation to resolve.
So there are times that employees expect us to fix their problems, and I'm the exact opposite of it. You got to go Dr. Phil on people. Sometimes you got to tell them to get real and get over it. And I regularly in 20 years have seen, and I get the phone call, people say, well, he doesn't like my ideas. He keeps turning off my microphone. He disrespected me because he turned his back. I'll take so much of that, and then I'll say, what's your solution to this problem? And you've got to step up, and I'll hold your hand through it. I'll sit in on that meeting, but you have to figure out how to solve this problem. I'm not going to solve your problem, but I'm going to help you solve yours. So you're absolutely right on that, Scott.
One of the biggest challenges, of course, is that everyone is different. And that's what I love about people is, everybody has a different pressure point. Everybody has a different thing that they respond to. Some people take criticism fairly well. Other people crumble. And, the larger you get, the more diverse your experience is with people. And especially in our business, I always say that 100% of the artist community is insane to some degree, and that is true. And a good percentage of the people that work in the industry are somewhat crazy. And my wife used to say that I was not happy unless I was surrounded by at least 3 crazy people at one time. If it went to 5, it was too much, and that's true. I get bored with normalcy, and we've all had people in our lives that are just come in and they're, you think, wow, what in the world was your childhood like? But let's talk through this. And sometimes it gets very personal. Sometimes you have to kind of dig a little bit to find out what somebody's history is before you can really figure out where why they're processing things the way they do. But I love that about this. That's my favorite part.
Most of my work is done on the phone unless I go into a market. And people say, well, how do you deal with it when you feel that on a call with a show? And I say, well, I've got a mute button on my wireless headset. And I'll engage it, and I will scream, God damn it, at the top of my lungs, and the two dogs go running, and then I unmute it, and I'm back to center.
I think
By
I'm
the
gonna
way,
try that.
I'm sorry, we will take questions at the end, so if you have questions, you can go new school and put them through the CRS app, or you can just stand up in the middle of the room and ask it too, but we will have a question and answer at the end. Gentlemen, what are the biggest challenges of leadership in 2020?
It's the T word, time. I mean, we are so stretched, and I know this is kind of trite, and we've all heard this before, but sometimes we prize and put more emphasis on the process of how we get it done than on the people we need to move to help us get it done. And I think vulnerability is at the core of every great relationship. Just think for a moment who is important in your lives, in or out of the industry. Think for a moment who that person or those people are. Relatively few if you think about it. And you have a relationship with those people where you can be who you are, you can move mountains with them, and that generally centered around vulnerability, getting to know them, allowing them to get to know you. I mean, they're a talent I work with. My goal is to find out where the divorces are going to happen, who's unhappy at home, who's pissed off at their kids, who hates their boss, and maybe this goes back to, the insanity thing. I invite that in to build trust, and that all comes from vulnerability. So the most important thing that any of us will ever be able to do is to commit our most valuable resource, time. I know you've heard it a million times. And be with people, whether they need you at 8 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock in the morning. Spend time with them, and you will become important to them. And then you can ask them to do stuff to help you move the strategy forward if you build that culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think the challenges are the same as they've always been, except that, we keep getting larger. We've already talked about how difficult that can be, but it's also no company has ever been happy to be where they are. The people at the top got to the top because they were visionaries, and you see somebody down the street making $1.25 on something, changing flat tires or something, and think maybe we should be in the changing flat tire business. That somehow relates to our business. I don't know. So we have more and more stuff thrown on our plates all the time, and it stresses people out, and it's difficult. But again, it really comes down to, if you can convince the people around you that you care about them, then they care about themselves, and they care about the job, and they, it's all the same. It's all just human happiness. And, I'm one of the most unhappy people in the world, but I work at it every day.
You're doing a great job.
Time management is kind of been a reoccurring theme there in the last couple of minutes. All of you have extremely busy schedules on your own. So you have the issue of managing your own self, and then you have the issue of managing your staff and their time. How do you handle all of that, Scott?
It's a work in progress, and I think I'm still trying to figure that part out, just like we all are. Part of what we try to design at the company is, it's all about collaboration with us, and we're all working together 24/7, trying to do the best work we possibly can on behalf of our clients. But that involves a lot of meetings. I mean, if you're going to collaborate, you're going to be in a lot of meetings. You're going to be carving out a lot of hours in your day that is spent just connecting with the people on the team. And we are trying our best to make sure that in the context of doing that those meetings are efficient, that we're not wasting anybody's time, that if that meeting's not relevant to you, you shouldn't be in the room. We're doing everything we can to make sure there's no time wasting going on in the process of collaborating.
Do you have criteria for the meetings? How long they can be? How many people can be in them? What kind of bullshit you will or will not tolerate?
100%. We put time limits on the meetings, try to keep that an agenda-focused meeting so they don't spin out into bitch sessions or just, conversations when we really need to run through the business at hand and move on.
It's kind of the opposite of me.
I would imagine there's a commentary in every meeting of yours.
Well, I like to have fun. And, I also have a racer in my life who really likes to have fun. So, when meetings get off track, to me, that's sometimes a good thing. Not everybody appreciates it, but it's all part and parcel of winning.
Let's talk about creating a successful culture. Steve, we'll start with you. You deal simultaneously with cultures of the shows you coach, the stations you coach, and then the culture of the company that owns those stations and those particular shows. Sometimes that's got to feel like you're serving a couple of different masters.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm by myself, so I get to choose who I want to work with too. They choose me. I also choose them, so I screen out the people that aren't serious about this. I find most companies, if not all the companies that I've dealt with in 20 years, all get all of this stuff. The question first is, do you have a strategy to win? Do your people know the strategy? And then understanding that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture, by the way, is not offering your employees free Panera once a month. Culture is build in the building, as these two gentlemen have talked about, spending time with people, having fun, being committed to them, vulnerability, deciphering between the big stuff and the noise. There's a lot of noise out there. Talent especially can get very bogged down by the small stuff, the noise that ends up not mattering. And so for me, it's, in time management and the build out of the culture, it's making the same commitment to everyone in the process. When I start, I say to talent, what expectations do you have of me? I'll share mine with you. What commitments are you willing to make, and what sacrifices are you willing to make to build our culture? I will share mine with you. And that goes up and down the ladder. I tend to not be hired by the show. I'm hired by managers, and that's on purpose. When I started the company 20 years ago, I said, I want to be hired by market managers, people at corporate, and program directors, because if you fix their problem, they just keep signing renewals. And then I have to earn the trust of the talent after that, obviously. If that doesn't work, it's not going to work. And I have to make the commitment of honesty and trust and collective responsibility. I'm a big Duke basketball fan. Okay, I live in Raleigh-Durham. My NC State Wolfpack beat them last night by 22. Mike Krzyzewski talks all the time. He's the coach of the Blue Devils, if you don't know who that is. He says he works on 5 things with his basketball players every year. The build out of trust, honest communication, a sense of collective responsibility, having pride in what we're about to do as a team, as a group of people, and to the point Mike made, do we care about one another as people? He says that's all he cares about. And if he gets that into his group of 13 young men, he then teaches basketball after that. And so for me, that I try to treat with respect and those qualities the interns on our call who get paid nothing because they're getting college credit for it, all the way up to the senior VP of programming at corporate who was probably the person who introduced me to the equation. Everyone gets treated the same.
Repeat those 5 again. This works no matter where you are in your life, whether this is a radio station, whether this is your bocce ball team, whether this is your tuba section, whatever, all of this works. Repeat those 5 again,
Sure.
please.
It's the build out of trust. We know that the core of that is vulnerability, the build out of trust. That's every day, every interaction we have, every piece of communication we have, are we all building trust? A sense of honest communication. Can we be honest with one another in both the good times and the bad? That's not false praise. I mean, Kevin Callahan is here. I've worked with Kevin at many different places. Here's the wonderful, I want to come down and hug you right now, Beverly Brannigan is here. And they know that I've sat on calls with both of these people where I have had some very difficult conversations with shows. Very honest, we're not making it happen, here's why. We have to be honest at all twists and turns, and can they be honest with one another? That's the second one. The third one is a sense of collective responsibility. It's we before me. Do you believe I work in your best interest before my own? And do I believe you work in my best interest before your own? Do we have pride with what we're doing? Do we have pride in the show? Do we have pride in the station? Do we have pride in the company? Do we have pride in the community in which we live? Do we have pride in the mission? And the last one, and I give you these in no particular order, the last one is, do we care about one another as people? Because if I can't care about you and you can't care about me, it's all bullshit. It won't work.
That's
it
just
will never
that's
work.
a powerful life lesson. I mean, that's just life in general. Mike, you've hinted around a lot about your culture. You want to elaborate a little bit more?
Well, one of the things that, I've always tried to practice is a belief that I will never ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And when I worked for Clive Davis, which was a crazy job that was very, very demanding, a lot of the street work was done by the center. The BMG had RCA and A&M Records and Arista Records and several smaller ones. And there were young people in the center that did a lot of what might be called the grunt work. And I wanted to show these people that Arista would be different because I may ask you to do something that seems crazy, but guess what? I'm coming with you. And we're going to do it together. And I have done like insane stuff that people around me, even my bosses at Arista, were saying, why are you doing that? Why are you standing in a parking lot outside of an arena handing out cassette singles to people? Why we pay you for more than that. I said, yeah, I know, but this kid needs to see that it makes a difference. And he needs to see that it means enough to me that I'll do it with him. And then maybe the next time I ask him to do it, I don't have to be with him. Maybe I will, but I don't know. The other things to me are, I've always practiced what I call general manager training, and it's become a little bit redundant, but no matter where I've been, I try to share as much fine detail about finances, about how things work, with everyone in the company on a regular basis. I don't care if you're in the mailroom. If you know about our finances, if you know how, we're performing, in a dollars and cents way, if you know how the impact of this artist's efforts are affecting the bottom line, you'll do a better job at what you do, even if it's just mailing stuff out.
Scott, talk about your culture and your keys and fundamentals.
Well, one thing I've learned about culture from working at different companies is that it's very easy to talk about. It's something that I think a lot of companies give lip service to. But I think it's a much harder thing to actually maintain. You really got to live your culture. And that also means that when you have people on your team who are counter to that culture, that are disruptive to that culture, there's really only one solution if they continue down that path, and that's honestly to get rid of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a hard business decision. Sometimes that means that you're going to take a hit financially in the short run by getting rid of that person.
Yep.
But if you do that and your culture stays strong, you're going to actually do much better in the long run. And that I think is where companies fail. I've watched it where people have been hired, not where I am now, but where people have been hired that were obviously going to be counter to the culture that we were trying to create and maintain. And by bringing someone like that in, it was a drag on the whole thing, and really was a motivation killer. It will kill the culture in seconds, because people suddenly believe that, or suddenly the rest of your teammates will not believe in what you're saying anymore. They won't believe in that culture, and the whole thing will spin out. And really, what happens is people go back to their silos and just do their own thing.
Mike, can I ask you a question?
That is so, yeah.
I'm fascinated by what you said about sharing financial information with even the lowest people. When I was
know that my bosses would appreciate that, but I've always done it.
I want to learn how difficult that was. When I was on the air back in the 80s and 90s, I was bonused on revenue as a talent, because I didn't get it at the time because I was even dumber back then than I am today. But the general manager was like, I need you to be sensitive to this side of our business. And it opened up a whole new world. I mean, it was easier to be siloed back then. I think as leaders, our responsibility is to share all of our information with our people because it empowers them. How hard was it to make that decision to say, most people would see this as proprietary information and we're going to give it to everyone because it's going to make them better?
It was easy. It was easy because I just believed it. And, you know, I spent too many years in the earlier parts of my career where no one shared anything with me. And I was doing a job, and I didn't understand the ramifications of the job. And the minute I got into a situation where I had people working for me, I was resolved to change that. And, you know, it's just, to me, it's just common sense. I can't imagine doing it otherwise.
The working title of this panel on the agenda committee was Pissed Off About the Millennials, the Entitlement Generation. But now to be fair, look, there's been Gen Xers and Gen Yers and baby boomers, and even the greatest generation had their pains in the asses to deal with too. But all of that being said, let's grind on the millennials a little bit here. Defined as being born between 1981 and 1996. So that's a 24 to 39-year-old age range. So that does now become your next generation of leaders. What are the challenges of leading this generation?
Well, for me, I think millennials have gotten a bad rap from the start. I've never really bought into.
But it's fun.
It is fun, but I don't really think it's all that relevant. You know, to me, what happens is, you know, we get older, and there's always, you know, the younger generation. Ultimately, they want our jobs. You know, I mean, that is part of what's going on. That's part of the dynamic, and that's a good dynamic, right? You need to accept that, and I think a lot of this entitlement thing has come about because, you know, yeah, they want to, the younger generation wants to figure out their spot in line. They want to figure out how they can advance, and part of the problem is they may be clueless how to actually get there, and that's where it's our job to show them a path. And I think if you give them a path forward, they're going to thrive. But they have to know what that path is and how they can actually succeed. And, you know, when we find talented people, when we find someone who we think is a superstar as an agent, you don't want to hold those people back. And the last thing a millennial or really anyone wants to hear is you got to wait your turn. That's not a good way to manage people. That is not motivating, and it's not going to work with millennials or anyone else. You have to, if you think they have all that potential, then you have to start figuring out a path forward for them and set them up to succeed. And I think that's how you get rid of a lot of the baggage that exists around millennial culture. Give them a path.
It is a challenge, and I have a policy where, you know, take me to lunch. Krennic, how many times do I say this? Take me to lunch. You know, you choose the place, and I'll go with you, and I'll pay. But take me to lunch. I don't care who you are. If you work for me, I'll go out of my way to have lunch with you, and I want to know your thoughts. And I am astonished at how many young kids who have been in our company a year or less will take me to lunch and say, I want to be in your seat. Put me on a path, or give me advice on what the path is. And it's like, whoa, you know, I never had a path in my life, so I don't totally relate to that. I never wanted for anything. But, you know, what I do is I just say, look, you are making a difference here. Your presence is known. Your opinions are valued. And the more you express that, and the more you insert yourself into how we do our business, no matter how small you think your thing is at the moment, you're going to be recognized. You're going to get the shot. You know, it will happen. And don't think about my next job should be, and then after that it should be. think about what can I do to make myself known and to make a difference in this company right now, and just have some faith and confidence that the people around you will be smart enough to put you on the next path. But this business of planning things makes me nuts.
Yeah. I think ultimately it's a respect thing. We all have, everyone in this room has blind spots with what we do. I mean, one of my blind spots is that I'm not a millennial. And so millennials will see stuff that I don't see or I can't see. And I have to actively engage everyone who's different. What am I not seeing here to the point of take me out for lunch? I'll take you out for lunch, by the way.
And while they're at lunch, you say, could you fix my phone?
Yeah. I wonder how many people you go out to lunch with in that age group and they're convinced that you're going to say, we have to let you go. It's a respect thing. And for me, the old paradigm on the programming side of it being about the 2 R's, ratings and revenue, I don't think works in a general sense for millennials or people who are, for some in this room, half our age. I like to show millennials the power of radio, which we have forgotten because of so much shiny objects that go on over here. We'll do a community service project at a radio station, and I'll put the millennial in charge of putting all of the items together that help us execute it. They're sort of the team leader, so they're empowered, and we do most of it. And they walk away thinking, I had impact today. I had impact because they asked what I thought, and they followed my game plan, and I got to see the awesome power of radio past ratings and revenue. But I think ultimately it ends up being a respect thing. And you have to be comfortable as a leader to not have all of the answers. It's really easy because it's time efficient for me to say, hey, here's how that problem's solved, or I saw that in this market back in 2006, and here's how we solved it. We have to be comfortable in our own skin as leaders to say those 3 really powerful words, I don't know. What do you think? You tell me.
It's amazing to me how many young people will make what seems like naive comments or ask a naive question, and inside you're going, oh my God, you just don't have any experience here, do you? And then on a drive home, all of a sudden it hits you. Oh my God, they're right. This is. I had totally not thought about this the right way. I overthink things.
A little bit of crystal ball here, fellas, in our last few minutes. What are your expectations for the next generation of leaders? What do they need to know, and what do they have to have?
I'll say empathy because that word was used earlier and I happen to like it. So I think the next generation of leaders want to be world conscious and want to be full in and want all the information and want to feel like they're part of something really big that will change the world. So do it. Do epic shit.
I'm drawing a blank here. I don't.
That's a first. We have stumped the band. I get dinner for 2 at Dan Tanner's restaurant. Yes. For those of you old enough to remember that reference. Yeah. Scott?
Well, I think, for me, one of the most important parts of the job really is building that leadership base on your team. And, I'm constantly trying to find those people that are going to, at some point, replace me. Those people who are going to step up and be the leaders that everybody else on the team need. So, a lot of that for me is just, it's somewhat gut instinct on that of trying to figure out who has that thing. It's like when as an agent, we're constantly trying to find talent. And, a lot of times you'll run across somebody that you're not sure why you think this is going to be huge, but you just know it is, because there's that star potential, that sort of, that thing you can't describe that exists in the artist. I think, with people on the team that you're, I like to find those diamonds in the rough that I think might actually one day be the next generation leader. And it really is a hard thing to describe because I can't tell you exactly what that skill set is, but I know it when I see it.
Drew, are there any?
That's what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. Drew, do we have questions from the app?
Yeah, we got quite a few actually. A lot of them talk about empathy. There's a few that talk about millennials. We sort of covered a lot of that. Mike, how many people actually take you up on the take me to lunch thing?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
The question is, how many people actually take you up on the take me to lunch practice that you have?
A fair amount. And then here's what will happen. I'll go with one who invites me to lunch, and then in the conversation over lunch, they'll say, "You know who should take to lunch? This person, because you will be blown away by what this person has to say to you." So I'll reach out. So it's like a ongoing chain, but I'd say at least once a week I go with someone on the staff.
Great.
After our staff meetings, when I said once again, don't be afraid, don't be shy, I was like lined up every day. That's the other thing about young people is they like to eat strange food. I like grew up in Leave It to Beaverland. I want meatloaf. I don't want the fucking shit you're.
One last one is, does anybody have recommendations on some great books that might help people to cover some of these topics that we've discussed that really are enlightening to you?
The books that I would recommend have nothing to do with the industry, that have changed how I view all of this. I'll offer two. One is called Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. If you have not seen her TED Talk, you'll watch it 50 times. It's that awesome, and she has a Netflix special on too. She's all about vulnerability and how it's the birthplace of all that is right in the world, the greatest belonging, the most loving, the deepest caring. Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. The other one that I read is by Chip and Dan Heath, and it's called The Power of Moments. And it's just about creating very special moments for the people who are in your circle that are unforgettable. And if you do that for your employees, they'll be addicted to your leadership.
I don't do that thing. Last book I read was a biography about Sandy Koufax. But if you want those books, just go to Jimmy Harnon's office because he has all of them.
Scott?
Well, I would also say Brené Brown. She actually came and spoke at our company retreat last year. And, I think the way that she unpacks the leadership piece and the vulnerability and all of that, the empathy part of it is, you ought to read that one.
I should.
Harnon's got it. It's in his office.
Maybe what we can do is get a millennial to read the book to Mike over a lunch. Just a thought.
I read two things. That's it. Two magazines. The Economist and The New Yorker.
Excuse me.
I read them religiously, and that's all I have time for.
What's a magazine?
Any last questions from the audience? Beverly?
Yeah. I have a
Great question.
I have a interesting little anecdote about that. I'm full of anecdotes. When I was with Tim DuBois at Arista, no one knew what was going on. Clive Davis hired this strange singer-songwriter producer that talked with a bad Okie accent, and nobody knew what was going to happen, and we exploded. And our business was just off the chart. The artists Tim was signing were just phenomenal, and we couldn't grow fast enough. And it was like, again, not knowing the rules, it was like, we need somebody to do this, and we need somebody to do that. So I put out the word that we were looking for this job, and people from the industry would come and talk to me, in a sense, interview. And, they all had skills because they had done the job somewhere else, but they also had some baggage. because they had done the job somewhere else, or you could, you knew there was some attitude or there was something. And what happened to me in a really crazy time was we were surrounded by interns, and you could see who had the character and who was going to fit. They just didn't know anything. And so I foolishly, somewhat, made the decision that I know this kid, if I invest in this kid 6 months, this kid will be better than all 5 of the people I just interviewed, because this kid's smart, this kid can adapt, and this kid can move. Now, the problem is we were growing so fast that we had too many of those people. And at one point, I had like 5 key positions that were filled with kids, and my doorway never got clear. There was always some kid going, "Mike, can I talk to you?" But to me, it's about fit. It's like, are you smart and do you fit? And the rest of it we can figure out. I don't need your skills right away. We don't, it's okay.
Mike Dungan, Scott Clayton, Steve Reynolds, leading your leaders. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks, everybody.
Good job. Great job.